Hello. Recently I've been asked a lot of questions about how viable do I think that Edinburgh would be in the current season of ranked, or in general in a competitive meta. And I've actually been leveling. I've been leveling the line right now, and I have reached Edinburgh myself, so I've actually got to play it like, I don't know, 9-10 games or something like that. And my opinion is very mixed, as it is on most of this line. Now, most of you would probably know that I haven't been too big a fan of the way they went with this whole Royal Navy cruiser thing. I felt like they tried too hard to make it gimmicky. But this matchmaking is pretty terrible for me, of course. I'm solo queuing, as I pretty much always do when I make commentaries. And matchmaking decided to throw me into T10 matchmaking. I'm asking the Kagero in front of me to scout, like go around and actually see what's coming, spot incoming DD, spot incoming ships, spot incoming anything. But I watch him hide in a corner and smoke up, which I call doing the potato. Because that's basically, if you do this as a DD, that means you have no plans of actually scouting, you have no plans of helping your team, you have no plans of actually torping anything. Your only goal is to secure yourself that cap XP. That's literally your only goal if you do this. It's the most selfish and the worst possible play you can make as a DD, and it always annoys me when people do that shit. It's extremely frustrating, so I'm just gonna go into his smoke and I'm gonna use it, because if he's gonna potato smoke right here, whatever, I'll take it. Now he's moving out of his own smoke into torps that my Hydra is spotting, so lucky for him that my Hydra was actually on, otherwise he would have managed to kill himself already. And he manages to survive just barely. Now this Fubuki of course managed to get himself spotted, and he's already within my Hydra, and my Hydra is spotting the gearing and the Udaloy of course. The Hindenburg behind me is a bit too eager to shoot them, so he's wrecking me instead of like actually wrecking them, which is a bit awkward. But we're getting some big kills here. That was a Fubuki down, this gearing, his engine is broken, and I have really good arcs on him. He's about to slip behind the island, so I'm going to switch to the front turrets. Yeah, let's switch to the front turrets, there we go. I guess still got a good arc on the front turrets, and I managed to delete him. For those that aren't aware, when you zoomed in like that, if you press C, I think the default key is C, don't quote me on that, but I think the default key is C. If you press C, then you switch your point of view from your front to back turrets and vice versa. So if you're peeking around a corner, you can often get a better view of where your guns are pointing if you use that trick. But here once again, Udaloy trying to stop in the smoke, trying to save himself, but he doesn't realize he's still within my Hydra range. And I managed to get a close quarters expert in the Edinburgh, which is of course pretty rare and pretty hilarious. And I think it's pretty amusing because they just lost 3 DDs, T8, T9, T10 DD, and in domination losing that many DDs this early is pretty much game over. So that's why I'm pretty amused by this whole situation. My Hydro saved our Kagero and it pretty much got all of them wrecked, which is pretty goddamn funny. And it's in moments like this where if someone asks me right now, do you think this ship would be competitive or like viable in a competitive point of view? And I'd be like, yeah, I mean, maybe you can sneak in really close, you got 9km concealment, you can sneak in close, you can get this smoke action and Hydra action going, and you can be a real pest, and if someone pushes up like this Hindenburg does, then you can do this really heavy damage to him, and like, it feels strong, the damage number just keeps pumping up, this DPS keeps like raining in, this Hindenburg is just eating massive amounts of damage here. Like his HP is draining way quickly. I'm in perfect safety in the smoke. I have my heals ready in case something goes wrong, and you feel powerful. But then you kind of realize that it's pretty much an illusion of power, because then this happens. Well, he pops his own heal naturally, but most importantly, he turns away. And this little change, just angling his ship 90 degrees to the left, and all that damage, all that DPM drops to 0. I'm doing no damage to him. I literally volley after volley of 0 damage hits. Bounces and bounces and bounces. I'm not even shooting a battleship, I'm just shooting a cruiser that isn't even known to be that tanky. The Hindenburg isn't exactly the tankiest cruiser, and he's bouncing everything I do. Well, that smoke ran out, so I pop my own smoke, and I keep nailing this. Now I'm starting to finally get some plunging, but mostly it's the fact that he finally decides to turn. Now he finally decides to give broadside. Had he kept going in a straight line like this, he could probably have fled easily. Uh-oh, is he actually going to do it now? Of course, 10 kilometers away, and I'm already struggling to hit him. 10 kilometers away and I'm a cruiser and I'm struggling to hit an enemy cruiser because he makes small turns, because the arcs are so insane. Now he's actually giving broadside, and I think this should be the kill. And that's kind of when someone asks me, do you think the Hindenburg will be viable in a competitive setting or anything like that? I just have to say no. Like, that scene there, in my opinion, just demonstrated all the strengths in the beginning with those DDs being wrecked, all the strengths of the ship, but then it also demonstrated all the gigantic weaknesses. Namely the fact that just turning away drops your damage to 0. It's not even like, if the ships even had a HE that did, let's say, that HE that did decent damage, but let's say had a 1% chance of fire, or like 3%, something ridiculously low that made HE spamming highly unviable, and made you want to focus AP spamming at all times whenever you had a broadside available. If the ships had that option, then they would be so much more versatile and so much more viable in situations like that, where they could actually finish off low HP targets just by switching ammo type like any other ship can. But it just doesn't exist, and having your damage drop to 0, having basically your ship being turned useless by something as simple as angling, is always going to be such a massively crippling issue. I mean, they have these other strengths, of course, like, well, you saw how much damage I did giving broadside, but then again, any cruiser would do that giving to that. Of course, I have my great heal, which is nice here. So there are certainly strengths. Am I gonna get my Kraken here? That's the rune I wrecked earlier. 0 damage hit. Oh, those shells should look... those should be my Kraken, never mind. Someone else took it. Sad days. But when you ask me if do I think this ship or even any of the higher tier ones, are they ever going to be competitive? I mean, the tier 9 might be simply because the anti-air on it is so incredibly strong that going for having a Neptune in your group simply for massive tier 9 anti-air might be really strong. But then again, it's like, do you really want to have a Neptune for that when you can just as well you can have a Baltimore and you get great AA and great radar and still really good concealment. Like Baltimore gets down to what, 9.7, 9.5, something like that, really good concealment. So, or you can just get the Donsko and get really good long range AA and radar. Honestly, it comes down to the fact that if you give up the smoke on this thing to get radar on it, then you are so entirely dependent on everyone else, because these things are too squishy with any sort of angling to survive anything. So ultimately, very hard. I just can't see them being competitive ever, especially because in competitive games you often focus on burning down opponents. Now I mean literally burning them down, not just like damaging them a lot, but whenever you see someone in competitive games, people are smart enough to always keep angled, so people tend to switch to HE and just spam massive amounts of HE on it, because you can't really angle against it, and the fire will eventually, after your repair runs out and so forth, the fire will get you killed. And that's why HE is so strong against good players, because you can't just nullify it. But this AP thing is just so easy to nullify. Like, if I saw the enemy had any sort of Royal Navy cruisers and I started suddenly getting hit by AP, it would be so easy to counter it, and you can't really beat any good enemy ship in a 1v1. Like you can't roam with this like you can in the Atago. The Atago, for example, in competitive play is considered is a roamer. It's a free play type. I uploaded a few competitive Atago games from Omni Games on this channel, so you can see what it looks like, because I usually play the free roam style of Atago, where I'm given a lot of freedom to do my own stuff. And the reason the Atago is so good at this is because the Atago is exceptionally good at getting away from situations and pretty much defeating any other ship in a 1v1, or just outrunning them in case it's a battleship or something like that. But any other cruiser it can take on and win. And that doesn't exist with the Edinburgh. Like, you can't take on anything and win, because all they need to do is angle, and well, your DPS drops to garbage. So the Edinburgh, a fun ship, a random battle clubber that can be quite enjoyable, as long as people don't use WASD hacks and cheat by angling against you, making you literally useless. Then it's fun. And of course against DDs, but even DDs can angle against these ships at times, which is insanely frustrating. You don't know frustration until you see a DD bounce all your shells. That is the definition of frustration and like blue balls in this game. So do I ever see the Royal Navy cruisers in their current iteration are just not ever going to be competitive, in my opinion. They're going to be a fun, gimmicky little pick that you can use for shits and giggles, but if you want a radar cruiser at T8, you'll bring the Chapayev or New Orleans instead, and that's pretty much it. And if you want a smoke cruiser, then you bring the Kutuzov with the long range HE spam and all the other available usefulness it has. I'd even bring a Hipper. Which I consider one of the bottom tier ships. I even bring a Hipper instead of an Edinburgh to a ranked game, because then you at least have the German Hydra to help you, and you got general good range and all this. Because the Edinburgh is such a one-trick pony, and it's so easy to beat the one-trick pony. That's the biggest issue. This game looks like it's going to end. I'm not going to get my Kraken, I think. He's just going to see if I can secure this final cap for me, and see if I can get that nice amount of XP from this game, since I am actually grinding for the Neptune now. I wanted to make a Neptune commentary earlier with the preview version, but it turns out the video I had recorded with that had gotten corrupted, so I'm just gonna have to make that Neptune commentary once I unlock it, which should be fairly soon, because regardless of my issues with this ship, I am getting fairly good XP in most of my games, unless I get the smoke bug, which is insanely frustrating. But against T10s, 2.6k base XP is of course very nice and very satisfying. But once again, this is a very different situation than a competitive game. But I hope that answers the question. If you guys want competitive T8s or T9s or T10s, then I do not consider the Royal Navy line one that will ever, well, unless it's changed, but in its current situation, ever be considered viable.